Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is bring. Let's take a look at some of the definitions or ways that you might use this verb. The first way you might hear bring used is to mean to take or go with someone or something to a particular place. If you happen to have children, it's likely that they bring home notes from school or from their teacher, right? And the note might tell you that the child needs to bring a particular item with them to school, maybe for a craft or an art activity. A second way you might hear the verb bring used is to mean to cause something to be in a particular state or condition. Sometimes as we read news or historical accounts, you will see one event or one thing being described as bringing about change, so causing some type of change in condition. A third way you might hear the verb bring used is to mean to begin a legal action against someone. Now, it's more likely to hear that if you're reading stories about law, or maybe if you're studying law as well. Not so much an everyday use that people will hear. A fourth way you might hear the verb bring used is to mean to force oneself to do something unpleasant. So with this particular usage, you're always going to see a reflexive pronoun. So someone might say, I couldn't bring myself to do that unpleasant thing or unpleasant action. You should know that bring is an irregular verb. To make the progressive tense, we're going to add another ing on the end of this word to form bringing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb have a completely different spelling. So we change the ending vowels and consonants as well. So we pronounce the past tense and participle forms as brought, brought. Now let's take a look at some phrasal verbs with bring. And I want to note there are many, many more phrasal verbs than what I have listed. I tried to pick out some of the ones I think you're more likely to hear or see when you're reading. So let's take a look. Our first phrasal verb today is bring about, and it means to make something happen. Let's look at an example sentence. Anyone can bring about change for good. Also, a little similar to that second definition of the verb that we were looking at earlier. A second phrasal verb you might hear is bring along. That can mean to bring someone or bring something to a certain place. This ties back to the first or main definition of the verb we were looking at earlier. Here is an example of bring along in a sentence. Bring along a change of clothes. So here's an imperative sentence. It's a command telling someone to do something. The next phrasal verb we're going to look at is bring back. It can have a couple different meanings, and we're going to focus on two. The first meaning for bring back is to cause someone to remember. Let's take a look at a sentence. Seeing my old elementary school brought back so many memories. Okay? So it made me think about my experiences as a kindergartner, first grader, second grader, etc. A second way you can use bring back is to mean to return. Here's an example sentence you might hear if you visit a library. Bring back the books by December 15th. The next phrasal verb we're going to look at is bring in. It can mean to earn. Here is an example of this usage. The new tax will bring in millions. Again, they're describing the city or state or whomever is enacting this new tax is going to earn millions of dollars from it. The next phrasal verb we'll take a look at is bring on. It means to cause something to happen. Here is an example sentence. The pandemic has brought on a lot of stress. So again, the sentence is describing the pandemic has caused a lot of stress. Many people have lost their jobs. Many people have gotten sick or lost a loved one. Those are all things that can cause a great amount of stress. The last phrasal verb we're going to look at can also have multiple meanings. We're going to focus on two. And that last phrasal verb is bring up. The first way you might hear bring up used is to mean to mention or discuss something. Here's an example sentence. They didn't bring up the argument. So they didn't talk about it or discuss it further. The next meaning of bring up is to raise a child. So when you hear this phrasal verb used, someone might be describing the place or the area where they were raised, or they might be talking about a particular value or something they were taught as they were growing up. Let's look at an example sentence. I was brought up to avoid missing school or work. Now let's continue using bring, and today we're going to focus on modals. Actually, we'll be doing that this whole week. So today our focus is going to be on talking about ability. And there are a few different ways to do it, and we can describe past ability. We can talk about ability in the present sense. We can also discuss future ability. And we'll practice affirmative, negative, and yes, no questions in each of those tenses. So let's start with past ability. There are two ways that I can discuss past ability. One way is to use could and the base verb. So I'm using the modal could and the base verb. Or I can use be able to and the base verb. And for the be verb, I'm going to use the past tense form. That's was or were. Let's look at two sentences. They're going to describe the same idea. It's just two different ways of expressing that idea. So the first affirmative sentence is, the district could bring back more students. Or I could say, the district was able to bring back more students. So again, I'm describing their ability to have students return to the classroom. If I want to make a negative sentence, so I'm saying someone did not or something did not have the ability to do something, I'm going to insert not after my modal, so we'll have couldn't bring, or not after the be verb. So you'll hear wasn't or weren't able to, and then the base verb. Let's look at those example sentences. They couldn't bring the idea to life. They weren't able to bring the idea to life. Here, these two sentences are expressing the idea that a group of people maybe had a wonderful idea, but for some reason it did not become reality. It sort of stayed in their minds. If I want to ask a yes or no question about past ability, I can do that the exact same two ways we've been discussing. So I could use could, then my subject, then the base verb. Or I can use was or were, then my subject, then able to, and the base verb. So here are two example sentences. Could he bring himself to watch the video? Was he able to bring himself to watch the video? So that sentence is going back to that fourth main definition we were looking at earlier in this video. So making oneself do something rather unpleasant. Now let's talk about our ability in the present. We're going to change our modal from could to can. And we're going to use the present form of be. That's am, is, or are. And again, we're going to do this in much the same way. So If we use our modal, we'll use the base verb right after it. And if we use be able to, right, we're going to pay attention to that be verb and then keep the base verb on at the end. So let's take a look at an affirmative example. We can bring some Thanksgiving foods through TSA security. Okay? So again, this is a true statement. I think each year before the holidays, our national agency describes what can and cannot be carried on to an airplane. So here's the same idea being conveyed with be able to. We're able to bring some Thanksgiving foods through TSA security. Now, if I want to make a negative sentence describing present ability, I'm going to use can't, or I can say is not, or isn't, are not, aren't, or am not. So let's take a look at those examples. They can't bring food or drinks to the theater. They aren't able to bring food or drinks to the theater. Finally, if I want to ask a yes or no question about someone's present ability, I can use can, then my subject, then the base verb, or I can use a form of be, my subject, able to, and the base verb. Can he bring a dessert? Is he able to bring a dessert? Now let's take a look at future ability. And what you're going to notice here is that the structure with the modal is going to look exactly the same as in the present. So one way we can tell we're talking about future ability is that there might be some time signal either in the sentence or it's sort of implied as part of the conversation. If we're going to use be able to talk about future ability, we're going to use will be, and that's how we're indicating future. So let's take a look at two examples. She can bring a doctor's note, or she will be able to bring a doctor's note. Again, in the negative, to describe future ability, it's going to look very similar to present. And if I'm using be able to, you're likely going to hear native speakers use the contraction won't. Here are two examples. I can't bring up that painful memory. I won't be able to bring up that painful memory. So remember, bring up here is meaning discuss or mention. Finally, let's look at the examples of the future questions. You probably have the structure down now, right? So with the modal, we'll say, can you bring your notes to the meeting? Or if we use be able to, we would say, will you be able to bring your notes to the meeting? Finally, today, we're going to take a look at some phrases that use our verb bring. And the first one is bring home. And when people use this, they might mean literally if we're talking about a particular object. If you're telling your children to bring home a particular object from school, or maybe you're telling your partner to bring a certain grocery item home from the store. That is certainly one way to use it. But another way you might hear this phrase used is to mean to make very clear. Let's look at an example sentence. Dr. Fauci has brought home the importance of wearing masks. If you're following the news here in the United States, you'll know Dr. Fauci is one of our top doctors, and he is constantly talking to different people and stressing the importance of wearing a mask during this pandemic. Another phrase you might hear is bring to mind. This is a bit similar to a phrasal verb we looked up earlier, and that is to recall or remember. Let's take a look at this usage in a sentence. Watching a Charlie Brown Thanksgiving brings to mind so many childhood memories and traditions. So this is describing a particular program that's generally on this week every year in the United States to celebrate the Thanksgiving holiday. The last phrase we're going to look at is bring to light. It means to disclose or reveal something. Here is an example of this usage. The personal stories of families who have lost a loved one to COVID-19 have brought to light the tremendous impact of the pandemic. So I think many of us early on didn't have firsthand experience with this terrible virus that was going around. And you might still hear people suggest that it's not real. But the more we hear from families and others who have lost people, you can hopefully see hopefully that their stories reveal to us just how serious this pandemic is. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.